Well, we're finally doing it. We are finally hitting the West Coast. West Coast, we are finally giving you some love.
Hi, everybody. How's it going? My name is Dave Thompson. This is Josh.
Hi, how are you?
And if you haven't been tuning in, we are on a national inclusion tour to find the most inclusive employers and programs and people in the United States of America. Isn't that right, Josh?
Indeed, indeed. And I do believe that we have a big one on today, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so when we talk about neurodiversity inclusion, uh, that's usually from our standpoint of talking about blue collar work and social enterprise, meaning mission first businesses like our friends at Spectrum Designs Foundation, who we work in close collaboration with, right? But the conversation around neurodiversity employment is much bigger than that, and is largely around technology and IT and some really incredible things that Josh and I are not good at, right, Josh?
I'm terrible at that stuff. I'm just very bad.
Yeah, I remember your line from our TEDx. You said, "The truth is, I'm really bad at math."
Yeah, like really bad. If I were your accountant, like you'd be in bankruptcy so fast, it's not even funny.
So anyway, that brings me to kind of introducing our guest. So in 2019, I think I've mentioned on the show, I got an incredible opportunity to go to the Autism at Work Summit in Florida at the ELS Center. Now it's called the Neurodiversity at Work Roundtable through Disability In. But a really incredible group of minds are part of that program, including our partners at Spectrum Designs Foundation and other social enterprises like Rising Tides Car Wash and our friends at John's Crazy Socks, right? But then some companies you may have heard of, like Google. Ever heard of that, Josh?
I think I might have. I'm not
You
quite
have
sure.
to go on askjeeves.com and look up Google. You'll see.
Is that still a thing? Ask Jeeves? Is
I
that
don't know.
still...
Then people from Microsoft, people from EY, incredible large companies that are doing amazing things in this space, right? And then I met my friend Jeff Miller. And Josh, I've talked to you about Jeff Miller, right?
Yes, all the time. He's been talking a lot about Mr. Jeff Miller.
Yeah.
A
So
lot.
Jeff runs a really cool organization called Potentia. And Potentia is a organization that sets up companies for success in their neurodiversity hiring initiatives. So without further ado, I am so stoked on this one.
So without further ado, Mr. Jeff Miller. Jeff, it's great to have you on Sounds Like Autism. Welcome.
It is so good to see you, man.
Great to be with you guys.
It's so good to meet you, Mr. Jeff Miller. I mean, Dave always talks about you, and in his words, the energy. He always talks about the energy that you bring to this industry and thing. So I'm personally very honored to finally meet you. So can you please explain to us what is Potentia and how did it come about?
Sure. No, I'm happy to. Dave, when you and I met, it was 3 years ago, and in some ways it seems like 3 weeks, and in some ways it seems like 30 years. So much has happened since that really great event that we had down at the ELS Center. But sure, I would love to give you a little bit of a background just in terms of our why and how Potentia came to be, and then what we do today. So. My background is been in recruiting and staffing and consulting really over the last couple of decades. I was running a global consulting company, and the pivot for me that really led me to Potentia, ironically enough, happened at my mom's funeral. So my mom had a long bout with Parkinson's. And for anyone who knows about Parkinson's, it's a brutal disease, and my heart goes out to anybody who's dealing with that or has dealt with that. So to the point where when she finally passed, it was a relief for her that we knew that she wasn't suffering anymore, and we knew it was coming. But still, it's your mom. It's tough, and it's one of those events that you remember. It's everything about it. You remember. I was fortunate enough to give the eulogy. My dad asked me to do that, and it was a real honor to do that. But the event was my son Charlie, who was, as you know, was diagnosed as autistic at age 6. Fast forward, Charlie's 16 now, and Charlie is. I'm looking across the room, after the, the service has finished, and Charlie is comforting my dad. And, in just a very subtle way, just kind of leaning in and just checking in with his grandfather and how he's doing and what he needs. And a couple of things hit me. One that I'm proud of, and one that I'm not that proud of. It hit me very quickly, and parents will relate to this, that I've got a young man on my hands. And I really need to think about what life's gonna be like for Charlie when he's 26 or 36, and how I can support that the way that we have through his school years, and pretty successfully, thanks to his hard work and my wife's amazing work and helping to sort of figure that out with him. So I realized I needed to up my game in terms of what adult autism was going to look like in Charlie's case. But the second thing I realized, and this is the one that I had to kind of come to grips with, was that in some ways, without consciously doing it, I was underestimating my own son. And that hit me. That hit my heart, right? And that for a parent who loves his son like nothing, parents, again, will relate. We'll do anything for our kids. But maybe it was the noise that I was hearing from support personnel or school people or something like that. But some of that had started to seep into me a little bit, and it ticked me off. So I realized that I had an assignment, and I had some anger at myself about that assignment that I knew I needed to really dig in. Now, at the time, I'm running a global staffing company in the Houston area where we live today, and so this was really just a project as a dad to figure out what adult autism was looking like today. Certainly, with my background in employment, I was thinking about what kind of job Charlie would have, but other factors as well. Just how was he going to live his best life? And so I embarked on a big research project to talk to people overseas, all over the place, and learned a couple of things that really set Potentia in motion. Number one was I learned just how big the population is of individuals who are neurodiverse. I learned about neurodiversity more broadly, right? I was really focused on autism, which is really just one part of the neurodiverse universe that we all live in and benefit from. The second thing I learned was, and I'm a business guy, right? So I learned just how much businesses were missing this population. So as an example, and this related to my son, who is blessed not to need a tremendous number of supports, but he certainly has his challenges as well as a number of amazing strengths. So he's going to go to college, and so this was relevant. This stat was relevant for me, which was, if you're a college graduate and you're autistic, you're looking at an 80% unemployment rate. In some cases, 85%. And a lot of those who are employed are underemployed. That just offended me as a dad and as a business person, that, okay, you can clearly do the work. You got a 4-year degree, and you're not able, in this market with employment where it is, you're at 85% unemployment in some cases. Crazy, right? And then the third thing that I learned was that I started talking to companies that were doing, at the time, these autism at work programs that have become neurodiversity at work programs. So I talked to people who become mentors of mine since, at Neil Barnett at Microsoft and Jose Velasco at SAP and other folks like that had been doing programs for at the time 3, 4, 5 years, and they were telling me about how successful the programs were and how impactful they were to the bottom line: more innovation, lower retention, skill acquisition, and at some, we're talking about knowledge workers here. That also, it allows people to make the kind of money that allows them to be financially independent, which was a major motivation for us as a business. So I was struck by the success that these companies were having, but then I was struck by how rare their examples were. And that ticked me off even more, right? So this had grabbed me, and this journey and this research project had grabbed me. I knew I was going to maybe donate to a nonprofit, but it was really that last piece that told me, wow, there's a business here. And there's a way that we can leverage the system that we all that a lot of us work in. Potentia is a for-profit. We're a social enterprise. We're mission-based, but we're a for-profit. Maybe there's a way that I can take the skills that I have and put them to use in solving this problem, right? Which is really bending that curve of unemployment and underemployment for people who are incredibly deserving and just need a fair shot. So that's really how Potentia came to be. The stars of the show are my son, Charlie, who inspired me, and then my wife, who let me leave the traditional employment side and say, sure, go ahead, do that startup business back in 2019 that, you know, very few other people are doing. Go do that, you know, because she could see how passionate I was about it.
I liked everything you just said. That was all really interesting. But one thing particular stood out for me when you talked about the bottom line, because lots of people, when they think of neurodivergent people or people with differences and bring them on board, they don't really view them as like workers. They view them more as like, you know, a nice little helping hand here or there. But we really do contribute. This population's huge, and I think that it's more and more people are kind of discovering that like we're a huge workforce and we can do things which some other people can't do. And like we're really something which like employers should look to tap into because it's beneficial, even financially for the employer.
Right. Neurodiversify your organizations. It's in your best interest. And guess what? If you have a sizable organization, especially within certain industries, you already employ a bunch of neurodivergent people. I was in the closet as a neurodivergent person for a very long time. I have ADHD and dyslexia. I grew up with an IEP. I grew up in special education classes all my life. Right. And you know, I never necessarily felt like I was in the position to talk about that stuff. But you know, we love hearing these inception stories, as we call them, because so many exciting things are happening all around the country. So it's great to check off Texas off the list this time. But what there's a common thread that we see here in really motivated people that don't accept the status quo and don't accept no for an answer, whether it's neurodivergent people themselves or really dedicated parents or educators, thinkers within this space. And the best companies and organizations and projects are coming from people just like you. So great to have you on the show again, Jeff. Thank you. But here's kind of a really broad question. I don't know if Josh wants to ask this or I do, but I know he has the same
I'll do
question.
it.
What? Okay, yeah.
So I'm just gonna put like blatantly out there. So what is it that you basically do?
Yeah, what do you do? Right. What do you do?
Yeah, maybe I should explain that. So Potentia does a couple of things. We have an offering that we launched in 2020. And it was before the pandemic. We certainly didn't know the pandemic was coming, but it fit with what was going on in the last couple of years. And that was something called Potentia Projects, where the candidates that we were finding that were a fit for some small and medium-sized companies that wanted to benefit from neurodiversity would outsource tech and data projects to us, and we would hire our own staff to deliver on those projects, like any consulting firm would do. But the core offering, the one that we launched the company with, and the one that's the biggest offering that we have, is something called STARS, which stands for Spectrum Training, Recruitment, and Support. And so that's the primary way that we execute on our mission, which is to bend that curve and help businesses to run better in the process. Right? We connect individuals with neurodiverse talent and help them both to be more successful and live better lives in the process. So the way that STARS works is we spend a lot of time training companies, because what we found is that I can go out, I can find a candidate, and I can shop to find a home for that candidate. And it's really rewarding when we do. So obviously, if we find a candidate and they're a great fit for a company that we know, we'll certainly make that connection. But the core STARS offering says that we want to recruit and train companies. And so STARS is Spectrum Training, Recruitment, and Support. So we train the companies on what is neurodiversity, why is it a business benefit to you, and how can you become more ND friendly. While we're doing that, we're recruiting for pre-established roles for them. to help them to onboard people, manage individuals who are neurodiverse, and learn from it. And then we support both through a structured process on the back end to make sure everybody is doing well. By the way, we've got 100% retention for the lifetime of the company in the STARS program. So we've never had somebody fall out. Now, I do want to hasten to point out that average retention for neurodiversity programs is 96%. So I don't think we can take all the credit for that, but we're definitely proud of that number.
This is what's so exciting to me about Potentia. Too often we're talking about shaping the individual to live inside an existing system, whether that be school, community life, the world of work, etc. But I'm all about shaping the world to include everybody, right? And I really am of the belief that everybody benefits when you set up everyone for success, right? So training the companies is such a cool, largely missing link here, because when you change the companies, it's in the candidate's best interest, and it's in the company's best interest as well. They're going to get dedicated talent, just a pipeline of dedicated talent. That's so exciting. Yeah, I'm just blown away. See, I told you, Josh.
Yeah, this is like amazing, because looking back, as someone who grew up in the 90s and 2000s such, if you were to tell someone that, oh, we're actually going to try and succeed changing the business culture to fit, like, that's, I don't think anyone would have believed you or taken you seriously ever again, to be honest. And now that we are actually here, it's just like we've come such a long way as a society. It's true. It's really amazing. It really is. So the STARS program sounds extremely special. Do you mind explaining to us how it really works?
So the STARS program is really the majority of the way that we work. And the idea there, the fundamental idea there is, if you take a company from curious to competent on neurodiversity, then you're going to get deals in bunches. You're going to get, once they get it, they're going to keep coming back to you. And we've seen that be the case. For a lot of times they'll start with us in IT roles, and we could talk about the reasons why. But if they've got a legitimate business problem that they're trying to solve there, we'll work with them on that. Most of our roles are white collar, in part because we saw that there was a real gap there. A lot of the nonprofits and a lot of the government agencies in our area were focused on just get folks jobs, which I get, but that resulted in sort of lowest common denominator jobs, at or around minimum wage. And we were looking at candidates that could really make a bigger impact and be paid accordingly. So our average salary last year was $76K for starters. So, that can be life-changing for somebody and their family if they've been making minimum wage or been unemployed for the last 2 years. We had a gentleman who was unemployed for about 18 months. Has gone through our program, is on the leadership track with the company that he's working with now, and he just bought his first house. Right. So those are the stories that keep you going when you find those things, and when you're a small part of those things. But STARS is really the core offering in terms of what we do. So it's spectrum training, recruitment, and support. Spectrum comes from the autism spectrum language that we started with. We like the STARS brand, so we've stayed with it, although it's very much become more of a neurodiversity program. So it's not just autism that we're talking about, but it's really connecting companies with great talent across the neurodiverse spectrum.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, look, you said this individual got a house. That's not a small thing for anyone. It really does show that, like, things like this really do change folks' lives, and in a drastic way, not just like a little way. And these are like permanent changes, which then set people up for a lifetime of success. And it's amazing. I know I literally just said this, but it's the only thing I can think of. Like, again, as someone who grew up back then, to think this would actually happen, and to the scale it's happening, I mean, this is happening all over. It's wonderful. I mean, I would love, like, I wish the world was like this when I was growing up. It'd be so much easier for me. So this is great.
Yeah, and Josh, I think you touched on something really special here. It is incredibly impactful for the individual, right? But
Yeah.
and that's somewhat obvious, right? It's such a cool story to hear about a company like Potentia and big companies giving people opportunities that have lacked opportunities historically. But what about, Jeff, the benefits to everyone else? So in our talk that Josh and I gave a couple of years ago, we talked about something called the curb cut effect. So those cuts in
Hmm.
the curb were invented in the 1970s and weren't made federal law until 1990, until the Americans with Disabilities Act came into law, right? Those cuts in the curb meant for wheelchairs. It took an entire massive social movement, starting in Berkeley, California, I believe, for those to become law or to even exist, right? Um, so it was a rough process. And then now who benefits from curb cuts? I do. Jeff, you probably do, all the way out in Texas. Josh, I know you do. I've seen it for myself. The Amazon delivery guy, people with strollers, people that are partying in downtown Nashville, that might have fallen off the curb if there wasn't a cut there, right? So there are so many additional effects when we make efforts to include people who are different from us. So my question to you, Jeff, is how does how do other employees and how does workplace culture benefit from building businesses around neurodiverse thinkers?
Absolutely. No, you bet. And I love your analogy, or I love your example rather, of the cut curb effect. I knew what it was. I wasn't sure what you meant by that phrasing, but once you explained it, of course. And we use analogies like that when we're talking to companies, because the visible disabilities that people have, and I want to be clear, we don't consider neurodiversity a disability, but a lot of the companies that we work with still have that antiquated thinking, and we have to meet them where they are to help them move off that. So when I use that term, I want to explain what I mean there. We know our audience, right? And our audience is used to dealing with the old accommodations and disability kind of framework. And most companies haven't really come up with a good way to embrace neurodiversity, because it's something different, right? It's just individuals who walk around with different operating systems. It's not better or worse. It's not a disability. May have some challenges with it, but has massive strengths that come with it. So who's the disabled person, right? We have that conversation with our customers, and they're able to see that. But we use the example of the wheelchair ramp, right? And we say, if you had an applicant who wanted to get into your building and couldn't because they were in a wheelchair and you didn't have a wheelchair ramp, that's your problem. That's your problem as a business, right? Your business isn't designed to be able to accommodate that individual. So when you think about neurodiversity, and sometimes some of the differences are a little bit more subtle, we do use that analogy again because we know our audience and we know where they're coming from, right? But we would say, why wouldn't you look at the design of how you interview, how you onboard, how you mentor, how you manage, right? And look at the design of what you do there to make sure that it's inclusive in the same way that you would for someone who happens to need a wheelchair ramp, right? While we don't use disability language when we're talking about neurodiversity, because we don't believe in it in that context, we find that some of those examples can be helpful for customers who are used to that kind of framework. So we will use that in service of that argument when our audience, when we know where our audience is kind of coming from, right? Because a lot of what we do is change management. It's helping a company to move. Now they may be curious, but they're going to have to change some things. They're not going to have to turn their business on its head. They're going to have to change some really common sense things to be more ND friendly. And to your other question, Dave, when they do, the data is incontrovertible that it benefits every employee. So when you have a really good onboarding program, that's really specific and really lays out the expectations. That's really critical for someone who's neurodiverse, to understand. Tell me what you want from me, right? Don't leave it vague, right? Tell me what you know. Our community is they want to do great work, but sometimes the message is not always translated well, right? It's vague, it's not specific, so be specific in your onboarding about exactly what you expect somebody to do. Well, and have a good onboarding program, maybe assign mentors, right, that are going to help individuals to ramp, because our managers today have more direct reports and more to do than they've ever had before. So good mentoring and good onboarding programs are good for everybody. They benefit everybody of any neurotype, right? They're just, people are going to do better. They're going to feel more supported. They're going to be more productive. They're likely to stay longer if some of those basic things are put in place. So we rely very much on the data, right? We have a blend where our training is almost majority ND led, right? So a manager is going to hear from someone who's neurodiverse themselves, who's not speaking for every neurodiverse person out there, but is giving that perspective of saying, okay, I know you've used this job description for 20 years and I get it, but let me tell you why, for me, I wouldn't apply to your job based on how it's written, right? And that first person account is really helpful. I can tell them the mechanics of it, right? But I'm a parent. I'm not a neurodiverse, I'm not a neurodistinct individual myself. So, having that first person account is really helpful. Having the data to back it up is essential as well. And a lot of the data that we talk to is not just about, hey, this is going to benefit this new hire that we're going to help you to identify. It's going to benefit your entire workforce.
It is so cool to hear about this kind of template and this kind of setup to encourage neurodiverse employment nationally and internationally. We study a lot of programs. We come from a certain program that caters to a certain population of people in a certain place. And we've talked to dozens and dozens of people from programs all across the country, never one like this. And they're all different, and they're all different for a reason. And we all have so much to gain from each other. So it's really interesting to hear about.
So, can you give us a specific example of a company that you worked with and how it actually benefited the company itself by working with you?
Sure. Happy to. And again, we're really proud of that retention number, right? Because these are for-profit companies. They're going to keep people because they do great work. So, all credit to the individuals that we've been able to identify and the work that they've done. But we're so proud to be batting 1,000% in terms of, everybody that we've placed is still with the company and doing well. And that to me is the biggest evidence that we can give. The STARS program is designed to give a customer three things, right? At the end of a STARS program, a customer is going to have great talent that they likely would not have had before that's on the ground, that's working for them, right? They're going to have a set of customized best practices that allow them to continue the program, to do neurodiversity hiring, to be an ND-friendly organization going forward, and hopefully to scale that. And then the third thing is measurables. So we survey the managers and the team and anybody who's going to be part of that pilot program on a number of factors. How well does the manager communicate? How would you rate psychological safety, the ability to speak up, the ability to disagree, right? How innovative are you, right? The manager respects different points of view, different things like that. And then we survey them after the program. So you can see the impact of the program beyond just hiring, 5 or 6 great people, let's say, in a decent sized pilot. So those best practices and those metrics are then tools, in addition to the examples about the individuals who have who've come in and done great work, to say, hey, let's expand this. right? We've figured out how to do this in our environment. And one of the things that I learned from my mentors, you know, the Microsofts and the SAPs of the world are great examples because they're both global software companies and they both had programs for a number of years, and their programs are very successful and their programs are very similar, but they're not identical, right? They're not identical. And the reason is because they're different companies. They have different cultures. And so our approach is always to go to a company and understand where they are today. What processes do they have that they really like that could be really indie friendly, that we don't need to change a thing? What are the ones that we need to tweak, right? And again, a business doesn't need to stand on its head to be able to do this. A lot of the stuff is common sense, but we'll help them to be able to you know, to figure out what that looks like in their environment, because at the end of the day, it's their neurodiversity program, and we want to help them stand it up and make it highly scalable. So those are the things that we deliver every time. The other thing that happens every time we do this that I want to make note of, and it's really impactful, is the number of individuals who are with that company, who are, let's say, mid-career, who disclose as a direct result of the program. It happens every time. So we had an individual who was an executive, part of the leadership team of a Fortune 100 company. She disclosed in our training to her team for the first time. I mean, that's just a incredibly powerful thing when it happens. I was there to see it, and the support that she got coming back to her was immense. But think about it. She'd been with a company for 8 years, maybe 7, 8 years. And she'd made the calculus, obviously, that it wasn't worth it for her to disclose until she saw, one, that the company was making, you know, tangible steps to actually walk the walk and have a program like ours in place. And number two, she heard those first person accounts from individuals on my team. And she said, I just can't stay silent anymore. I need to come forward and I need to do this. And it's changed. It was already a good team, to be fair, but it's changed that team, and that team has just propelled forward in amazing ways. I had another individual who's a CIO who said to me, you know, he called me out of the blue, and we'd run a program in one of his departments, and he said, Jeff, I just wanted to call and thank you. And I said, sure, why? Well, tell me what happened. And he said, I've always had a reputation as a bit of a hard ass. And I'm a bottom line guy, don't get me wrong. We're in a for-profit business. We've got to deliver results. But he said, thanks to your program, I've had half a dozen people that have individually come to me privately and have disclosed that they're neurodiverse. And it's given me the opportunity to really practice that person-centered leadership that you guys preach, that I always believed in, right? But it gave me the opportunity to show them that I care, right? Now, I'm still a bottom line guy. You still got to deliver for me. But it gave me a chance to show that other side of myself as a leader. And I never would have had that opportunity if you guys hadn't come forward with this program at this time. Now, I don't know how you quantify that in terms of the measurable impact of that beyond the things that I've already laid out. But there's no question that these are culture changers that impact the whole company. And those are just a couple examples.
Yeah. So just like I was saying before, Jeff, I mean, when you come with a culture of honesty and disclosure and openness and empathy and understanding, everyone really benefits. And I never felt more seen or more heard when people were understanding of my brain. That was such a moment for me personally, professionally, emotionally. And you actually had something to do with being inspired by that, because that's when it happened, when we hung out back in fall 2019. So it's cool to come full circle and have this kind of deep dive with you.
No, I completely agree, man. I completely agree. So can you tell us a story about a participant and how they've benefited from being part of the program you got?
Absolutely. No, you bet. And I just to follow up on the earlier point, you know, for us, disclosure is an incredibly personal decision, right? So it's we celebrate it. when someone feels compelled to disclose, we think in a supportive environment, we think that's a great thing. But we also understand that it's a personal decision, and everyone makes their own, and we fully support that. In terms of the benefit to the individuals, I think one of the things that I would say is that part of our philosophy, and all the credit goes to the individuals, but I think I like our philosophy on this, is that some people that we've seen, especially who have adult diagnoses of neurodiversity, are then with that definition, are then sort of, whether it's formally or informally, are sort of taught that, okay, this is where you are, right? So now that you've defined this aspect of yourself, this core aspect of yourself, does that mean that that's where you're going to be for the rest of your life, in terms of development in other ways? And we radically reject that, because the neurodiverse people on my team, the neurodistinct people on my team radically reject that, right? There's no reason why an individual who's diagnosed at 21 can't continue to grow and prosper and learn new things and become better at X, Y, and Z, just like a neurotypical person who's 21, right? They have long careers ahead of them. So I think, we talk about this when we talk to the clients. We'll say one of the client perspectives that we get sometimes, that we've started to see and we guard against, is sometimes when you learn something new, if you learn that if you learn about a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And what I mean by that is when we train a company on neurodiversity, and they learn they learn a lot, right? The tendency is then to think sometimes, okay, well, I know Joe is autistic, so he's going to respond this way. And it's like, no, we've given you some information with which, and we want you to learn that, with which to have a perspective on how a lot of people who happen to be neurodiverse may respond. But that doesn't mean that individual who's working for you is going to respond that way. So, we say, learn the lessons, lose the label, right? Because at the end of the day, it's about that individual, who may be going through some things at home, or may have different things that are going on, or may just their neurodiversity may just show up in a different way than somebody else. So you've got to practice that person-centered leadership, right? But to your point, the one that or one of the ones that I think of is, there's an individual who applied to a position that we had for a big corporation here in Texas, and we scheduled a meeting, and this was about 3 years ago, and we met at a Starbucks, and this individual brought his mom, brought his caseworker, and they did almost all of the talking. And he would not look me in the eye, which was fine, right? But he was clearly very anxious and very, challenged in this new environment. Fast forward, he's brilliant, but he just, that was his communication style at the time. Fast forward, a year later, he's working full time at one of the the big companies here in town, and he's on the leadership track. He's going to be leading people, and really has kind of come into his own, and feels that confidence. And because a lot of times, a lot of our folks have past traumas from past experiences where they've just felt like a square peg in a round hole, through no fault of their own, but they're working for companies that have no idea how to support them, and they're just hitting a brick wall, and it wears on them, and that trauma is real. And so a lot of times that's what's coming forward. This individual technically was brilliant, but stepped into a leadership role. And I remember there was a conference that I had spoken at the year before, and they reached out to me the following year and asked if I knew any speakers who'd be interested. And I immediately thought of this individual, and I thought, I wonder if, and without hesitation, he was like, "Oh yeah, I'll do that." And spoke to hundreds of people and kept the audience absolutely wrapped the entire time. Right. Now, if what was comfortable for him was that lack of eye contact, and that, and that's how he wanted to communicate going forward, fair enough. Right. But the idea that as a 20 something, that's where he had to stay, we reject utterly. Right. He has the potential to grow and learn and evolve and gain confidence and see how that feels to him, just like anybody else. And so, I'm constantly, reminded and rewarded when I see these examples of individuals that, okay, you got a diagnosis, but why on earth would we say that's not the end? That's the beginning, right? That's the beginning of, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but my feeling on it is that's the beginning. I mean, that's going to aid you in understanding yourself, and then figuring out how you want to thrive and how you want to impact the world and do great things. But sometimes I think people think that, okay, now that I've got this label, that defines who this person is and is going to be, and we just utterly reject that.
That's wonderful and really exciting. I wonder what the future is going to be for neurodivergent employment. I think it's going to be really cool. It's looking great so far.
Yeah, I feel like we're living in the future. So much happening so fast in this space. That actually kind of reminds me of a question. I don't know how to frame this, but so what's our end game here for companies like Potentia, who are solving this problem and closing this employment gap for so many people? It reminds me, there's this great advertising campaign for some dating app. I think it's like Hinge or Bumble or something like that, where they say the whole point, our goal is to close. Our goal is to put ourselves out of business, because once we get all these couples together or whatever, we won't need an app like this. So that's kind of what I picture for our end game, is like, we won't need, no offense, Jeff, but we won't need companies like Potentia. You know what I mean? We want to make the world so inclusive that this is just commonplace, right? And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Jeff, but what's the ideal future look like to you, right? And is it that companies like Spectrum Designs Foundation and Potentia aren't needed anymore?
Sure. No, great question. And the way that I would answer that would be to take you on a typical corporate client journey for us. So when we start with a company and they're curious and they want to know more, and maybe they've done some things around diversity and inclusion initiatives in the past, but they've certainly got some pain points around human capital. They've got some pain points that are helping to drive this decision in addition to wanting to be more inclusive, right? But it's normally the marriage of those two, right? We want to be more inclusive, and we've got some real pain points here. And if you can help us solve that in a way that helps us to be more inclusive, fantastic, right? So we're talking with the individual who's in HR, someone who's in recruiting, someone who's in D&I. But we're also talking with someone who's a CIO or a CFO, or someone who's running that side of the business, and is living every day with the pain points of, I can't find enough talent. I can't keep enough talent. My talent isn't as engaged as I would like them to be. My managers aren't communicating as well, or we don't seem to be getting the results, or any number of these things that neurodiversity can really help, right? So it's that mix of knowing that sort of at a broad way, that inclusivity helps a business to run better, be more profitable, right? And then a specific area where we can target it. Now, a lot of people will start with us in IT, and I mentioned this earlier. And I think part of that is because it's a legitimate pain point. There isn't enough tech talent out there, right? Part of it may be because they've seen Big Bang Theory, and they think that all individuals who are neurodiverse are STEM, right? And we quickly disavow them of that. And we let them know, listen, we've got more candidates in our database that are non-STEM than our STEM. But if you've got a real pain point here, let's address that. Let's do a pilot in IT if that's where you need us to be. But let's be intentional about the fact that the next one that we do is going to be somewhere else, right? Now, again, most of the work that we do is in the white collar space. It's office jobs. A lot of them are remote now, but they're still working in offices. And that's as much a function of the fact that we're still a young company, we're still growing, and we had to pick a lane, right? And the lane that I saw that wasn't being serviced was that lane of those individuals who could be making 70, 80K, right, but weren't getting those opportunities. They're working a call center for minimum wage or something, like that with a 4-year degree, right? Ridiculous. And so that was the niche that we wanted to fill, and we're continuing to fill that consistently. And then the next time we work with a company, if they like us, and we've got 100% retention among all our customers, is in addition to the retention that we have among the individuals that we've placed, they keep coming back to us and saying, help us over here, help us over there, right? And in that way, they are learning how to be ND fluent, ND friendly across the enterprise, right? And you remember what I said before, every program we do is customized because we're meeting the company where they are in terms of their hiring practices and their best practices. And so the idea is that at the end of the day, not only, right, we're helping them to build what's going to be their neurodiversity program, right? And they'll have an NDERG, and but and they'll expand what they do, and they'll grow, and we'll help them to do that. But ultimately, the goal is not that they have to have an ND program. I mean, the ERG is great, right? And the ERG is for different groups to make sure that they feel heard and they can talk candidly and connect with each other. I think companies have a huge opportunity and really responsibility to support that kind of thing. But from a hiring perspective, ultimately, this should just become part of the wallpaper, right? This should just become part of what you do. You're an ND-friendly organization. So if someone discloses, you know how to handle that. If you're doing college recruiting, you have a process that's designed to accommodate that. If someone discloses and they say, hey, I need an accommodation for this interview, you know how to handle that. So, at the end of the day, it should really become just part of your human capital strategy that you've implemented, and is allowing you to, beat your competition that doesn't have that, because you're accessing and optimizing for 25% of the population. And if you've got a competitor that's not, you're going to beat them every day of the week. So that's my view of where we're headed. And yeah, it's the kind of that idea, Dave, like you said, that ultimately we should work ourselves out of a job. And we've got a lot of work to do to get there, but ideally that's what happens.
All right. So can you tell us, how would someone support you? How do they follow you, and like all that stuff?
You bet. So in terms of getting in touch with us, the best way to do it, my name's Jeff Miller. I'm the CEO. You can email me directly, jeff.miller@potentialworkforce.com. You can also email info@potentialworkforce.com. You can check out our website, potentialworkforce.com, and learn more about what we're doing. We're building a neurodiversity talent community because we know we can't employ, and our customers can't employ everybody that needs meaningful employment, but we want to help in that process. So we're loading assets, and it's all free for the neurodiverse community. We'll be loading more assets in there. So how do you write a resume? How do you deal with a difficult boss? And on, right? And also how do you make community with other folks that are maybe facing similar challenges? Opportunity to mentor, to be mentored. These are a lot of things that we're building. And as we do more STARS programs, that finances our ability to be able to create something like this and offer it for free. So you can reach out to us, in any of those ways. We're on all the social media platforms, so you can check us out, on any of those. And if you know a company that is curious and you think they'd benefit from being competent, let us know. And by the same token, an individual that's looking to really take that next step in their career, we'd love to talk to them as well.
All right, Jeff, we have taken up more than enough of your time, but hopefully this helps spread the word about Potentia and about what's possible, about the potentials, right? So thank you so much, Jeff, and come back anytime.
Yeah, please do. Thank you.
Thanks.
Really enjoyed it. Great talking with you guys, and look forward to doing it again.
What do you think, Josh?
I think it's awesome. It's really amazing. Like I've said before, that we are where we are as a society, that this type of stuff exists. It's really, really cool.
Right. And this is the whole point of our inclusion tour, right? Is to discover why there are so many different kinds of programs and what they're doing and best practices, and just share knowledge of incredible minds like Jeff's on the show. So I'm really happy to do it, and happy to check off Texas off our big list.
Indeed. For our listeners, I just made like an air check. If you're watching this on YouTube, obviously you saw it. So yeah.
Yeah, and look, I have this button. Maybe every time we accomplish one, we could go. Texas is off the list.
Wait, where did you get that? Looks like the Staples button.
Right. Yeah, you can buy everything on Amazon. Cool, right?
That's pretty neat.
All right, cool. So Josh, where can they listen? Where can they find us? Where can they support us?
Well, I wanted to say they can find the coolest hats, the coolest shirts, and that stuff on soundslikeautism.com. Now, all of our merchandise is actually made by folks on the spectrum. So by buying it, you're supporting not just Sounds Like Autism, but you're also supporting employment of people on the spectrum. So you're doing a 2-for-1. So you can feel doubly good about yourself when you get that compliment. Wow, that's a nice hat. Or wow, that's a nice shirt. Because I guarantee you will.
That's for sure. Yeah.
It
Purpose-driven products. Yeah. Thanks so much for that. And obviously check out soundslikeautism.com, at Sounds Like Autism on Instagram, on Facebook. And yeah, we look forward to continuing this journey with you all. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for listening.
All right. Bye.